you can have talent, but actually you need to have like determination, and over time determination looks like talent. So you don't have to be, it's a very female thing to be like, oh, I'm underqualified, well, so I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to apply for the job, I'm not going to start my own business. Do it and understand that you might fail and be okay with it. Like, then you failed. So there were no good steps. There was no moment where I was like, oh, I'm ready to do this. It was necessity, and I wanted to do it, and I was okay to fail.
This is Hackers to Founders, a podcast about cybersecurity professionals who have reached the pinnacle of their cybersecurity expertise and have ventured into new frontiers, whether it's launching innovative startups or making impactful investments in our industry. My name is Chris REal0day, and I'm a vulnerability researcher best known for traveling and meeting hackers from all around the world. And I'm using what little extrovert skills I have to introduce to you hackers that are changing the world. Okay, and welcome to the Hackers to Founder podcast. Today we are joined with Maxie Reynolds, a trailblazer in sustainable technology and cybersecurity. Maxie is the founder of Subsea Cloud, a company revolutionizing data center technology by deploying them underwater, achieving significant cost and environmental efficiencies. With a career that spans offshore engineering, underwater robotics, hacking, and red teaming, she has truly navigated uncharted waters in multiple industries. Her journey began working offshore as an ROV pilot, traveling the world, and where she's earned her computer science degree while working offshore. She's also published her first book, A Guide to Surviving Childhood, Look Mom, You Shit Yourself. From a technical writer, this led her into cybersecurity, where she worked with the renowned organizations like PwC in Australia. She later founded her own red teaming business and authored the book, The Art of Attacker Mindset for Security Professionals. Alongside with her professional achievements, she's also an advocate for innovation, sustainability, and tech leadership. Maxie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That was quite the introduction.
Okay, great. Hopefully it was all right.
It was good.
Okay, cool. So, starting out, I did a little bit of research and stuff. So I know that you're Scottish. I did a lot of research, but I know that you're Scottish, and like I was thinking if I knew any other hackers of Scottish, and do you?
You know what? I someone I went to school with, their brother is like, I think, a hacker, but I won't name him because I've not spoken to him for 30 years. But no, not really. I don't think there are any like in my network anyway. And if there are, God, they will hound me after this.
Oh, don't worry. I know them. They're some great people. So I went to CCC camp a few years ago, and there was the Scottish consulate, and I got to meet them. And the way I knew that, I was like, man, what is this drink? And they're like, yeah, so we made some Buckfast. Have you heard of this?
Oh my God, Buckfast. Oh God. Buckfast is a rite of passage, and it's a wine, and it's really popular in Glasgow and like Coatbridge and places like that. It's just, I grew up trying to steal my auntie and uncle's Buckfast.
There you go.
I think if I tasted it now, it's one of those things, you know, whatever you were stealing when you were younger and you went off and you got drunk in the field and you told your mum you were like at your best friend's house, and if you even think about it, if you even got a whiff of it, now you'd pass out. That's Buckfast. I would
really
rather die than have to swig that. Ugh.
Interesting. I don't know. So the ones that I tried and I had there, it was delicious. I really liked it. And so at the camp, I was with my British friend, and I was like already like too messed up at the time. So I was really shy, and I was like, we walked by their camp, and I was like, can you go and ask them for some Buckfast? And he's like, I don't think it's going to come off very well if a British man goes into the Scottish camp and asking for Buckfast.
Correct. Absolutely not. No, not allowed. No. That you're taking your life in your hands. Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, I guess he made the right move, but I was like, man, I really wanted some. So I think next time I'll go and I'll try to run up and find some and get some courage to go. But yeah, okay. So it's a Scottish staple, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The rite of passage, I guess. It's one of those drinks that you drink when you first started drinking, and then you don't like to drink it. Is it just difficult or strong?
Well, it's strong and it's like syrupy, and it's not, because I don't know what it's, you know, in like places like France, and I'm sure in like states in the US, you start drinking responsibly. Maybe your parents like allow you to have a glass of wine when you're 16. That's not how it happens in
Not in the
Scotland.
United States. No, absolutely not.
Is it not?
No,
Good.
no, not at all. No,
You start drinking what you can steal from your parents or your aunts or your anybody. And so, or like we used to get a man, this is like tangential, but there was a guy who was just a definite degenerate like um gambler, and we used to give him our lunch money. Like we used to all, put in a big pot and give him our lunch money, so there'd maybe be 10 of us, and then get him to buy us like 4 liters of cider from the shops, and then not go to school and go to like one of the country parks, drink the cider. So, and we were drinking cider not because we loved cider. And
no,
like,
of course not. It's cheap,
quenchy
right?
cups were called. Yeah, it's because it was $1. Yeah. So you don't start drinking and it's like, oh, let me see like what the tequila's like, and oh, does that have agave in it, because I don't want the hangover. It's like, give me whatever you, oh, that's a tin of Tennant's, I'll take it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's the same. So
I'm just
no, we can do tangents. I'm happy. No. Talk about degenerate stuff. So yeah, American culture. Yeah, you sneak what you can get, but once you hit of an age, okay, well, off like you're 18, but you have a friend that's 21.
Yeah.
Because you can't buy alcohol in the United States unless you're 21, but you're 18, so you try to figure out how to get it. You get together your money, or if you're underage as well, you get together your money, buy the cheapest stuff.
Yeah.
Back in my day, it was Keystone Light. It's the absolute just watered down beer that you can get, and it's horrible. It's horrible. And then I think like Mad Dog 40 or something. Have you had that?
Talk about that. Yuck. No, I'm getting a bit clammy. No.
Exactly.
It's funny because as a red teamer, I had some, I think it's fairly illegal, but we got some fake IDs, and I remember as a youth, if you've seen my cousin Vinny, or as a youth, in Scotland, we were all dying to like get fake IDs because on American movies that's what they have, and make ourselves 18, which is when you can drink in the UK. And when I got my red teaming fake ID, I made myself like 4 years younger. So it's funny how it changes. But yeah, silly.
Okay. All right. So we've opened up by talking about degen stuff. So let's talk about other types of activities and stuff like that goes against the grain. So in a previous podcast that you shared that your grandfather initially didn't want you to do offshore work, which inspired you to pursue it anyways. How did you take those first steps to go like around his opinion of you not wanting to do it?
So my granddad was... I never asked him. It was my dad that didn't want me to work offshore. No, it's fine. My granddad worked offshore when I was younger, and he was like the only person who had any money in our family. We used to, like when our electricity ran out, we'd go to my gran and granddad's, and he used to have to pay like tickets in the meter in Scotland, and so I'd grown up like knowing it was a thing, and he was an engineer and so on and so forth, and so I had some like insight into the industry. And then my dad started to work offshore when I was probably, I think I was like 15. I think I'd already moved out. My dad started to work offshore, and then my mum and dad broke up, and I'd gone to him and said, hey, will you help me get offshore? And he was like, no, absolutely not. And I think it was because like I was stepdaughter, and there was a little bit of like, I know what goes on offshore, and there was also like, well, no, because what if I bump into you on an oil rig? I'm sure there were a lot of reasons for him. And honestly, if he'd have said, yeah, okay, I'll help you, like, let me introduce you to my agency or the company he was working for, which I think was Fugaro at the time, I'd have maybe been like, okay, well, let me see what else I can do. But I don't know if it's a bug or a feature of my personality, but once I've been told no, then I'm like, well, fuck, I'm gonna do it. And so that was really the start of it for me. I wanted a job where I could travel. I wanted to be paid well, and I didn't have any skills because I left, or education, because I left school when I was 15, and I probably stopped paying attention when I was 12. So
how did you get the skills required to work offshore, and did you contact somebody? Like, how did that work?
It's actually my mum was like supportive. My mom's like, has always been my hype man. She's like, if you want to do it, you can do it. And I was also going out with, I guess, my like first serious kind of grown up relationship, a guy named Mark, and he was like very supportive of it too. So he we lived together and he paid the bills, and then I went to like a couple of schools for robotics engineering, stuff like that. I got the Scottish government to pay for that, and I'm sure Mark covered some costs. And then I called around all of the offshore companies and was like, hey, I'm trained in this, would you take me on as a trainee, like I'll work for free if you want. And then eventually I found a company in Norway who were like, okay, yeah, we'll take you on. And that was kind of the start of it. Yeah.
Nice. So did you go out to Norway immediately afterwards, or did they have a location
did.
closer to you?
I went to Norway straight away, and we started working on a system they were building in house, like a robotic system they were building in house. So like I got training on the job, and then we went offshore. I think the first place we went was Trinidad, Tobago, and we went onto this like rusty ship. So we mobilized, so that's like getting everything on, setting up, making sure it's got power, making sure it doesn't interfere with the rest of the systems, so on and so forth, making sure everything's, to regulatory standards and things like that. And then I stayed on my first job for I think maybe 3 months, which is not normal. Normally you're just month on month off, but there are fewer rules down there. And then it was enjoyable. I loved that time. I had no responsibilities at all, and it was just very freeing. And those were my formative years, right? I started working offshore when I was 19 or 20, so I grew up offshore with all walks of life. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, and then so the work that you were doing there, you were like engineering stuff to be utilized in the ocean, or does that sound about right?
So there are different asset classes offshore, underwater. There's critical infrastructure. So there's the pipelines and the wellheads and the manifolds and like Christmas trees and that we call them, things like that. There's a lot of like assets there, and basically it's all just so that we can get the oil and gas up, separate oil, gas, water, and get it on shore. Like that's really the job. And our class of subsea system is around robotics, and basically we do the stuff that divers can't or maybe shouldn't do. So it's like we build this robotic system. It's called an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle, and it has eyes, so to speak. Like it has cameras, it has a sonar system, it has tooling, it has hands, it has baskets if you need to like move rocks, or if there's a lot of things that you have to do just in order to maintain that critical infrastructure. And that was my side of it. I was on the inspection, maintenance and repair, and sometimes laying the critical infrastructure. And at the time I was only involved in oil and gas asset, IMR, but there's a lot to be said for telecoms too, which is 99% of our internet usage goes subsea cables. Like there's very little that goes to satellite, ironically, unless you're working offshore, and we do a lot of satellite calls. But that's kind of everything that's down there. I don't know if that answered your question or if I just went off on one.
No, it's interesting. So all of the like internet connectivity is pulled from at least on the offshore rigs. It's pulled up from the satellites.
Yeah, for the most part. Like
what about the energy itself?
Fiberize.
Like electricity. How do they get electricity?
Oh, yeah, okay. So fiber first, we're starting to fiberize a lot of offshore rigs for multiple reasons. We want to be able to do more from onshore instead of sending like hundreds of people offshore. I think there are multiple reasons, efficiency gains in fiberizing the rigs, and we're part of that in a couple of different countries. And then in terms of energy, it's quite interesting. So there are power cables laid out, there are generators, and actually some rigs they have they use the gas as it comes up, which is like quite interesting.
That's what I was wondering. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So does it refine
really cool.
it then as well, or how does that work? Is it able to be used immediately?
I think basically it's immediate. I'm not sure that I've ever been on a rig where that was the sole source of power. I don't know though.
That's
I don't
okay.
think I cared in my 20s. Yeah, I was just like, are we cooking? Is somebody cooking my dinner? Is somebody washing my clothes? Great, then I'll be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have people washing and cleaning and handling all the other types of amenities like this. Someone's cooking. Is that their job as a
Someone
chef
cooks.
on
Yeah,
there?
there are chefs. There are like cooks, cleaners, paramedics. It's like a microcosm. It's of a city. It's like everything functions as it should. There's someone for everything, and I think when like this isn't sexist. I think it's just realistic. When men go to work offshore and they come home and their wives not picking up their shit that they leave at the back of them, they're like, what do you mean you want me to do? They've just spent a month where every meal is prepped for them. I'm not saying it's good food all the time, but like everything is done for you. You show up to work and that's it. And you kind of get used to that. Even I got used to that. So I get it.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So then how much time did you spend at that company until you shifted over to do more cybersecurity stuff? You worked on your degree while you were doing this, right?
Offshore. Yeah, the Open University in the UK was like a real just gold mine for me because they have, and I think it's Aberdeen University also that have free courses. But yeah, I managed to get some long distance degrees when I was working offshore, and I worked for the same company for 10 plus years, and they just rented us out to different companies. So I was just really a contractor for all of the names that you know, but I worked for a very small company out of Norway for the most part.
Okay. And that's when you're doing the majority of your traveling, right? You've ended up in Australia eventually, it sounded like?
Yeah, I did. I loved Australia. If I could live there, I'm sure I would. It's just a little bit far from everything else that I need to do, but I just like their culture. With my husband, we'd lived in Miami, we'd lived in Los Angeles, we went to Alabama, which
Let's talk
I was
about
like,
that. We're going into this because me and my
Sorry,
wife, we're
Alabama.
actually getting
Go
into
on.
this. No, we're going to the whole United States. So me and my wife were actually like
Yeah.
deciding like where we want to
Where to
maybe
go.
set up, like
Yeah,
live,
okay.
or at least like maybe even purchase a property, renovate it and stuff like that. Kind of like that
Yeah.
excitement, and then maybe sell it. But so you were working. I think you worked in Miami. And then you guys started traveling through the United States. So when you guys did that, were you flying? Were you taking the RV, taking a car, and then like how long did you live at each location?
So we went to Miami, we lived there for a couple of years, and I'm the whitest person on earth. Like, I reflect sunlight, and I'm totally atheist, but the joke I always make is like, if there's a God and he was making me, he was like, oh, give her let her love sunshine, let her need warmth. But if a photon touches her skin, like, burn her to a crisp. So I just didn't enjoy Miami. There wasn't enough to do for me. I'm not a partier. I wasn't going out drinking and partying. And there was like no hills to climb, so it was flat. And I was just like, I fucking hate it here. And then I looked
No
at my
hills, yeah,
husband.
that's right.
Yeah. There's just flat and sunny, and I was like, oh, yeah. And then so I looked at him and I was like, I'm not gonna be able to stay here. So, what do you think about New York? And he was brought up on a little farm in Norway, and he's like, I'll die if we go to New York. So then he, with his ex-wife, had been to Los Angeles for a vacation. He's like, let's try it. So we went, and I loved it, and he was fine.
Okay. And Australia though?
In Australia, yeah, I met a lot of friends. I met a lot of people. There was, one of my really good friends. When I met her, she'd just sort of left her job and she'd created an ice cream company, and I was like, that's kind of cool. Like, can I taste it for free? And so yeah, I like that. And then I also, I was working for PwC, and we would.
So how quickly? So you got the job and then you moved to Australia. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So were you applying to jobs like all over the world, or just particularly in Australia? How'd that work?
Kind of. No, I was all over the world, but there are very few places that I want to go in the world. I love to visit places. I'm really interested in that. I'm really curious about other cultures and landscapes and topography and all of it. But there are very few places that I could go and live, and I wasn't going to go home to Britain. I would have been able to work in the States. I was just, I couldn't find a job that I wanted at that time, or that I was qualified for, actually. And then, so I was like, I looked at Australia because it was something that I wanted to do. And, when you don't have responsibility, so I had a husband, but outside of that responsibility, I think I decided, let me backtrack a little bit here. I decided from a very young age I was going to have the most interesting life that I could have and take all of the opportunities that were afforded to me. And I stand by that, sort of, if we can call that an ethos. And not having any responsibilities afforded me the opportunity to go and do things that most people can't do because they've got a mortgage, or they've got kids, or they've got some dependent. And I was thinking, well, if we're going to be married for the next 50 years, which we weren't, but like, if we're going to be married for the next 50 years, the 2 or 3 or 4 years that I'm down there aren't going to matter to us. So I'm going to go, and I know for most people that's like egregiously selfish, but this is sort of, you only get one shot at it, and there's no way. The lens that I like to view most of my life through, like quite a lot of it, I make the decision through the lens of, when I'm 90 and I'm on my deathbed, am I going to be saying, I really wish I didn't go to Australia, or I really wish I didn't start that company, I really wish I didn't fail at that thing? No, I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm really glad I took the opportunity. If it wasn't for that, these things wouldn't have happened. Now, I can't tell the future, but I know that there are knock-on effects and there are unintended consequences to everything, and I'm so willing to find out what those are, for the positive and the negative. And I have the freedom to do that. I don't have kids, and I think kids is when you kind of lose that right or freedom.
Okay.
Yeah. But
This podcast has completely shifted.
I know. Yeah. Welcome to this family podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything else. This is terrific and fine. We talk about everything here. The last guest I had, Marcus Saylor, on here. You know Marcus, right?
Yeah.
I suspect because he recommended I speak to you. And then he's like even helping me with some of the research. He's saying like, oh yeah, she was a model. You were in The Ville, I think, the music video she backed.
I hate him, but yes.
Give me that cherry bomb, $1 million swag on me, flyer than a carry-on. Sex in the city till I have her sing a Carrie song.
I'm gonna get him for that. Oh, I did. Yes, I was. I dabbled because when we moved to Los Angeles, I got picked up and I got to do some really cool work. And again, I have a funny relationship with like aesthetics and looks, because I never look in the mirror and think, oh my God, like I'm really pretty today, or whatever it is. Like, I don't actually have those thoughts, but I do recognize that I am treated as if I'm fairly attractive. I see the way other people are sometimes treated, and I'm like, you didn't say that to me, or you didn't do that to me, or like you held the door for me. And I kind of, that's where I see it. And then when I moved to Los Angeles and got picked up, I'm just having a conversation the other day about, I think I have an interesting face. I don't think it's beautiful, and that's all you need in Los Angeles. You just have to be interesting, and it afforded me so many opportunities, and I'm really glad. Like, I got to try out for like Top Gear, the when Jeremy Clarkson and that team left or got fired, because of the opportunities I had in Los Angeles. And that's kind of what I mean about the knock-on opportunities, the unintended consequences of different things that happen. If I hadn't have moved to Los Angeles, if I hadn't have got picked up by an agency, if I hadn't have been doing just some of it was just bullshit work, if I hadn't have gotten into some stunt work, I would never have, my name wouldn't be attached to Top Gear, and like I get to tell my kids or step grandkids or whatever it is about that, and it'll be less cringy in 20 years. It'll just be like, that happened. we're still waiting for that time where I'm not cringing talking about it.
So what kind of things were you doing as a stunt woman?
You know what? Stunts are really interesting because I never took like gymnastics or anything like that, and I was like fairly untrained. So a lot of my work was like hanging. You just hang for fucking hours, like off of ledges. You know, if there's like maybe a suicide scene that I was in where they'd sort of tried, but then hung on, and then I was the hang on, and I just had to stay there. My fingers are like cut. So it was interesting, or like drowning, because I had what's called a bossiet. So when you work offshore, you go in for your bossiet, and basically it's a really it's I loved it. Like I absolutely loved this course. So basically you go in, there's a large pool, and you have to like prove that you can escape, say, the helicopter that crashed into the ocean, which by the way,
Really? Okay. Yeah.
So you get into the helicopter, you get into the chassis of a helicopter, you buckle in.
It's like turns up around,
and
right?
it turns around, yeah. And my first time I went in, the instructor, I was obviously the only female, and so he was saying to me, when he's like looking at me, he's talking to everybody who's looking at me. He's like, when you get in, it's gonna do that, it's gonna bob because of the water. And I was like, yeah, understood. He's like, that's not it turning. Do not take off your seatbelt to escape. And I was like, okay. It gets it, they lower it into the water, so you're holding your breath. It started to roll just a little bit, and my brain went, it must have rolled. So I took off my seatbelt, and then it rolled around. So it goes the 360, and I kicked everybody in the face because my seatbelt was off. And so that was like a good time. That was a good time for me. And then when I got to the top, he was like on the edge of the pool, and he was in stitches. Like he couldn't breathe, and he's like, I fucking knew it was going to be you. And then I got to do that again. But basically, like, I had some water training, shall we say, so I got to do some of that just for like independent movies. And then I got to be in a music video, and when I was in that music video, I showed up hungover. Of course I did. And so I missed also a little bit of hair and makeup, and they done the best they could, but I didn't have a lot of time for like the body. And so we're sitting on the back of this car in that music video, and the director saying like put up your hands, and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. And he was like, well, why not? Because I hadn't shaved. And I was like, this is gonna follow me for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, I'm gonna have to say the reason my arms aren't up is because like I'm disgusting. So yeah, it was. Let's move on from that, though.
Okay, interesting, very interesting. So you've been a stunt woman, you were an actress, at least in music videos. Have you done any like lines and stuff like that in terms of acting as well?
Yeah, and some like little independent movies, but it wasn't something that I was. I didn't really go after those things. Yeah.
So when we ended up in Australia, how did we? We're gonna jump a little bit around. So when we ended up in Australia, you had your friend that had the ice cream shop, and you were also working at PwC. There was a time when you maybe made a mistake, I heard, and people thought you were Russian, something like
people
this.
People always think I'm Russian, but yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
How do they think you're Russian first and foremost,
just
and then
how I look? Just that's it. It's very superficial.
So let's go into I want to go into the water treatment facility that there is some difficulties or whatever the case happened. Like, what was the challenges that arose when you were doing a red teaming engagement there?
Yeah, so our job was like to manipulate to a degree or test the critical control system. So SCADA is like supervisory control and data acquisition, I think. It's been a long time since I've had to care about it. Or DCS, distributed control systems. And so I think I had one job, and it was an easy job because I was the trainee, and I think it was like basically I accidentally disabled the communication networks. I was supposed to test it, and I was like conducting network scans, and I overloaded or disabled the communication between the sensors and the controllers and the operational systems.
Did you do that from like on the computer, or did you like unplug something?
No, from a terminal.
Okay.
No, from the terminal. And I was just like typing stuff that I could, from my first course in Linux. Like
really? Okay.
Yeah, like I just wasn't. I was like, oh, this is fun, and then immediately we got a notification that all things weren't right, and I was like, fuck, and I didn't know how to undo it. I had no idea how to undo it. I was just like cd ... like how to get out. I was like, no, it wasn't me. I don't think that was me. And then immediately they were like, that was you. And then I had to go and talk to the local authorities, who just wanted to make sure that it was an accident. And in that time they were like, where are you? Well, you're not local, and which I think would have probably helped if I were. And then they were just like, there was like a security guard, and he's like, are you Russian? And I was like, oh, here we fucking go. It's like, no, I'm not Russian. And even if I was, like, do you think I'd have to come here to do that? The Russians are like pretty good at hacking. I can be in Russia. And then so we had that discussion. He's like, oh, so your defense is that you're not in Russia? And I was like, oh shit. So yeah, that was a good time. I don't like to talk about it. It's quite embarrassing. But yeah, it was.
Were you physically there?
Yeah.
At the location? I guess my question is, like, did you have other people that were on your team that were around you?
Yes.
Or was it just like, let's just
people.
Send her in,
No,
let her use cat on the thing, or change some ones and zeros in a config file.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Exactly. So, no, there were other people, thankfully, and I think honestly, maybe.
So how many engagements at PwC did you have? Did you have like a cumulative amount before you what was the steps between working there to then starting up your own firm?
In stitches, they crumbled as it was happening. I'm sure at the time, in their report writing, they were very serious about it, but ultimately, it's Australia, so they were just like, I'm not gonna do. I was gonna do the accent, but I'm not gonna do it. But they were like, that scene in Dumb and Dumber where he's like, pop another shrimp on the Barbie.
That's a lovely accent you have. New Jersey?
Austria.
Austria? Well then, good day, mate. Let's put another shrimp on the Barbie.
Let's not.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, but we're in a different world now, I think.
Yeah.
Right? I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
Cancelled for butchering an accent, but yeah.
So how many engagements at PwC did you have? Did you have like a cumulative amount before you what was the steps between working there to then starting up your own firm?
There were no good steps. There was no, I'm ready for it. I have enough under my belt. My visa ran out. We'd done a few engagements. I'd done some social engineering, some red teaming down in Australia, not all PwC. And then I was like, well, I'm going home, and what am I going to do? And so I moved back to Los Angeles, sort of by myself, and I was like, fuck, I need to do something. What should that be? And then I thought, well, I can do this for high net worth, private citizens. And then I just did it. Listen, I'm maybe in the minority on this. You can be underqualified for something. You just have to be good enough to be able to perform the service at a good enough level. And over time, I've got a really good friend, David Binswanger, and he's co-CEO over at Lincoln Property. And one of the things he recently said to me was, you can have talent, but actually you need to have determination. And over time, determination looks like talent. So you don't have to be, it's a very female thing to be like, oh, I'm underqualified, well, so I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to apply for the job, I'm not going to start my own business. Do it and understand that you might fail and be okay with it. Like, then you failed. Now again, I go back to, I don't have children, so I get to be that selfish. If you do have children, it's a different world you're looking at. So there were no good steps. There was no moment where I was like, oh, I'm ready to do this. It was necessity, and I wanted to do it, and I was okay to fail. And ultimately, I did fail. And I enjoyed it. I'm so glad that I did.
Okay, so some things that I'm thinking about, right? So you were able to at least, I assume like you picked up at least one client. Is that about right? At least one,
yeah,
right?
At least one. I'd probably, at my peak, I think I had like 5 clients, and then just as I was leaving, I was in talks with Paramount to do some pen testing for them, but I wouldn't have been able to do it by myself. And then I got hired by a social engineering firm, which we have a very contentious relationship, so I'm not eager to talk about that company, but it was good for me to get that experience with them. It was social engineering and red teaming over the United States, and I got to meet, some of my best friends.
Is this with Red Team Alliance or is this something else?
No, Red Team Alliance I really like. I took some courses with them, lockpicking, Deviant, and there's another one, I just can't remember it. But no, I really like Red Team Alliance.
Did you meet Drew Porter?
Yes. Yeah.
He has a podcast now at Red Team Alliance as well.
Oh, does he?
I've known him for about a decade at this point.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I like their courses. I thought they were really good. I think they're still running, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely sure that they're still running.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, as this is like an entrepreneur type podcast, would like to hear how you got your first client, and then how you gained more clients, and like some of the challenges around there. You mentioned like having confidence and stuff like that when you're able to speak, right? So a lot of, and what I'm realizing the more I speak to entrepreneurs is like, the very highly successful ones usually have some sales component that they're really good at. I'm terrible at sales. Like, I really got to figure out, like, I have to like memorize their business and what their needs are and budgeting and stuff like that in order to even have a conversation. And even then, I'm not. I could be better. So like, I'm always reading sales books. How were you able to secure like 5 different types of like clients? Or even the first one, and then like, what was your pitch and stuff like that when you didn't feel like you had as much experience as other types of?
So I'll start by saying I think you need 3 things to be successful in life. You have to be likable, you have to be driven, and you have to be smart. You might not need all 3 all the time, but like some combination, I think. So pinning that, I'm not good at sales. I don't have the patience for it, I don't have the skill set. What I am good at is keeping a network. I'm like fairly good at catching up with people. I'm interested in people. I am very naturally interested in people. I like to hear, you can tell from this podcast because I've just talked a lot, but like, I like to hear about your life, your interests, and I'll remember them, which honestly leads to being a good social engineer, which we all do. I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. I recently learned this thing called a Russell conjugate. The Russell conjugate, in any case, is basically where you have 2 words that are synonyms, but each have different connotations. So when I say I'm able to, I've got social skills, I can remember a lot about you, and that leads to being a good social engineer and good social skills, I actually mean them to be the same thing. When people hear, oh, you're a social engineer, is that manipulative? No, it's actually not. It's interaction with awareness, and I happen to be usually like good at that unless I'm really nervous. It's like an interesting difference in connotation there, but so I have that, and my network was how I got my first few clients. And then I happened to move into a building, it's called 10,000 on Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles. I happened to land there, it was completely random, and I walked out, there was a communal level, I walked out onto the 3rd floor, and I saw this little guy standing, or actually sitting down, he's talking to somebody else. I sat on this like sort of sofa next to him, and I was reading my book. And he's like, oh, hi, I've not seen you here before, like, what's your name? So on and so forth. So we got to talking, and he said, what do you do? And I said exactly what I was doing at the time. And he's like, oh, I might have work for you. I have a law firm. And I was like, okay, great. And so we were like chit-chatting, and it turned out to be Michael Avenatti, who is the guy. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I want work from you, but it took me a while to catch on. And like, he is who he is. I'm sure he's not all bad. But so like there was,
I'm sorry, who was this?
Michael Avenatti. He's the guy who was, I think, Stormy Daniels' lawyer against Trump.
Okay, got it. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it took me. He just introduced himself as Michael, and I was like, when I found out, I was a little bit shocked, and then and then I actually accidentally went on a date with him. Which is a story I love to talk about. Accidentally. So he's no, it's actually not like that. So he's like, we were trying to accidentally had a glass of wine. That was a joke. No, I didn't. No, it was an actual accident. It was an actual accident. He's like, so we were chit-chatting. He said, well, like, so we're talking about like what it takes even to just to be like an expert witness in cases. Okay. And then it was getting later and later, and he's like, hey, well, do you want to like talk about this over dinner? And we went to Craig's, and I've known the owner of Craig's in West Hollywood for a long time, so I was like, yeah, like that's fine, let's go. It's a very like safe place for me. And then we got out of the car in the front of Craig's, and there's always paparazzi there because it's Los Angeles, and it's sort of like, I wouldn't say it's a hot spot, but it's a very
interesting. So they just sit there?
They just sit there. Yeah, they just stand. And that's like, you know, you see that all over Los Angeles. So yeah, so I got out of the car, and the cameras started going off, and I was like, and it wasn't for me. And I was like, what the fuck? So we got inside, and I looked at him, and I was like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, ah. And then I discovered, and I was like, well, you could have, because like, I'm a hacker, and you're about to go to trial.
Yeah.
Maybe you should have told me. And so then that's my accidental date, and then we went home, not together. Okay. But God, we separately. Okay.
That's fine. So, yeah. As it is, like accidentally went home together. Just accidentally went up back at my place. Like I don't know.
No. There was no. I've never accidentally slept with someone. So no, there was no accidental. Your listeners are in for a treat with this one.
I'm just enjoying the ride too. I hope we all are at this point, you know. So yeah. Okay, so you mentioned a few things that I wanted to touch on. Oh, keeping up with people in the network. So I recently found this type of strategy where I also have a large list of people that I know, and it's only growing, which is terrific. But as I'm planning for my wedding, I'm like, damn, I got like thousands. My wife asked me last night, like, how many people do you know? And I was like counting, like a few thousands. Like, so I'm going through it. And one way to like keep up with them, which last year was difficult, but the year prior was great. We do I'll do like Christmas photos. I'll take them with my dog and my cat and stuff like that. And then I'll send over, I'll like pay to like make those like greeting cards or whatever, and like physically send them over to people's houses. And like, this is what real estate agents do. And I was like, why do they do this? This is silly, but it's so that they always like remember them. Cause generally when you get one of those photos, you put it on the fridge, and then for the entire 365 days of the year, you're going to see them every time you go to the fridge or whatever, which is like a good reminder of like your relationship with them, whether it's like strong or just like, I always see this person kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Don't send me those, cause I'll throw them out. But
okay.
just email
like
me
10 of them. I'm sure keep bombarding you with all of them.
No, yeah, I don't do that.
Everyone, send as many as you can.
Absolutely not. Please, God, don't. No, I do not. I think it's a good strategy. I think your family should be forced to keep them, so on and so forth. We don't, and it's not I'm not very British. I'm Scottish, but it's not a very British thing, I don't think. Maybe the elites, maybe the people who have high tea do that. I don't know.
I think it's. I know that's a real estate thing in the U.S. It
is. Yeah. They send me them all the time. But yeah.
You mentioned that you were reading a book, and I was listening to another one of the many podcasts that you had been on that you said you read about 50 pages a day and try to read one book a day. So
one book a week. Yeah.
1 book a week. Okay, that makes
Yeah.
that's probably a bit more accurate in
Yeah.
terms of reading. I know Ty Lopez says he's like, I read a book a day and I just skim, and I'm like, is that effective at a certain point? Do you get the returns?
Yeah, I know.
So my question to you is there any time when like you feel like, oh, maybe I'm like just digesting too much and I'm not sitting down and like sitting with the book? I think it's Alex Hormozy who's like, I'll sit down with the book and I'll read it like 3 or 4 times because like that book and just being in that mindset for that long a period is more effective than if I'm grabbing different types of books. I grab different types of books and I like reading them and like getting them, but once I'm like done, I'm pretty much done. Maybe I've written some book reports too, but like
Yeah.
I usually don't really revisit it unless I really need to. What are your thoughts about people that?
So I read a book called Blueprint, somebody Plowman, I think, Plowman, on genetics. And one of the interesting things that I read about in that book was heritability and gene expression. And in it, he was saying, actually, you can be predisposed to enjoy reading or not. And I happen to enjoy reading. You know, what I do notice is that over time my attention span is not as good as it was, and I think that is due to social media. My brain likes the quick hits, but it's not good for me. I don't feel as well or as mentally capable when I've not read, and I've not been very good at reading recently, and I can feel that just cognitively. So I don't think if you're sitting there going, well, I don't want to read 50 pages a day, then don't, but get information, read articles then, or listen to the books, or just like find information. I think the more information you have, the better off that you are in all areas, and you have to be able to weight it correctly, which is the problem with conspiracy theorists. Like, they don't always weight the information correctly. Everything's connected. Nothing is as it seems. Nothing happens by accident, which is another book I read on conspiracy theories. And I think once you have a subject matter that you're very interested in, then it's worth reading and rereading and going to that author and seeing their other works. I kind of do it like that, and there are some books I'm really glad that I've read, but I don't really need to read again. So Shoe Dog, by the founder of Nike, I read that once. I'm really glad that I read it. I've got my key takeaways. I don't need to read it again. Vaclav Smil's How the World Really Works. I find myself constantly citing
Tell me
that
about
book,
this, about
referencing
the
it.
4 elements that are utilized.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So he makes a few good points. I'm going to butcher it. It's been a little while since I've had to think about his like message and wording, but essentially he says, and I believe, that the world without, like, there's 4 key pillars to our modern world that we just can't do without, and we can't have these 4 things without basically fossil fuels. So ammonia, which feeds the world, we'd have mass starvation without it, and malnutrition. Steel, we build on. Cement and plastics. Plastics are everywhere. I'm not saying it's good they're in our food chain, but they are absolutely everywhere. And from the, PVC bags that we use in hospitals to make people feel better, to the railings, to the flooring of the hospital, it's all embedded oil and gas is in there. And including in our supply chain, I don't mean in our foods when we're finding like microplastics. I just mean that every tomato I think you eat has about half a tablespoon of embedded fossil fuels, because someone had to run the tractor, someone had to transport it towards you, someone had to make the plastic for the greenhouses that are on there. So this like misplaced and pervasive myth that we're going to get away from fossil fuels, I think we're sleepwalking into Armageddon with that. Like, we have a very non-technical population with very technical opinions on things they absolutely do not understand. So why are we not just using wind power? Well, here are the reasons why. And I think
I learned it
that
through
we
one
have
of your
to understand
podcasts. It was like
those. And
grab
then
the
you can have
carbon
more
and
of a
like just
balanced
try to make
opinion
it chill.
and understand
Yeah, that one.
the world is not, there's no they in a room sitting like going against our greater good, saying, well, we want the world to be polluted, so let's use fossil fuels. There's just technical hurdles, and we don't do a good job in the press of like showing people the technical hurdles. It becomes politicized, and it's just like a place to opine for most people. And when I read that book, Vaclav Smil just put a lot into perspective for me, and I was able to articulate what I think I knew, some of what I knew intuitively. So that book is like, I'll probably read that book 10 more times and still not remember everything. So yeah.
Right. And you've also mentioned that you believe in greenhouse gases and that the effect on the environment is happening. What was it called? Like, I learned it through one of your podcasts. It was like you grab the carbon and like just try to make it chill.
Carbon capture. Yeah, carbon capture is currently BS. So I'm not sure I can do a very good job of articulating this, but let's try. So I don't have to believe, like, CO2 emissions aren't like, God. I don't need to believe, I don't need faith. We have evidence that it exists, and we know for every, I think it's megawatt hour of fossil fuels that we use, there's about half a ton of carbon that's emitted because of that. We've got people, and I'm a big believer in science and research, and like let's try to do what is responsible and what's good, but let's not sell it to people like it's a functioning solution and then have the general public be really mad because we're not using it. We're not using it because it doesn't work. So with oil and gas, people pay for that because there's a high ROI. There's a high ROI in terms of our societal benefits. That's how we're driving our cars. That's how you're most likely charging your Tesla. So on and so forth. It's back to those four things: the ammonia, steel, plastics, and cement. So there's a high ROI. That's why we pay for oil and gas to be extracted. Who's going to pay for carbon capture? Because there's absolutely no benefit, and you have to spend way more on carbon capture than you will extracting fuel. And like, good luck taking your toddler to school or walking your dog when you've pumped CO2 into the ground. Like, where are we pumping this? We can't agree on a place to put our nuclear waste, but we're going to put like CO2 into the ground. It's going to seep up. Do you want that next to your house? Do you want to walk your dog there? No. And by the way, the energy you would require to do that is more than what you're saving. So now you're creating CO2 for this solution. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. And the other thing that I really hate is, while I'm on this little
I get it.
tirade, is in my industry, in the data center industry, we have a lot of companies saying, well, the heat that we are producing to cool the servers, so to put that into perspective for people who are not in the industry, you use your computer and it's on your lap and you're like, oh, toasty, like it produces heat, and that's because it's doing nothing useful. It takes your computer and servers, they, for the most part, don't do any mechanical work, right? So essentially what's happening is you're taking in sort of power, and it's to manipulate the transistors. So they move over the transistor for a binary outcome, and that produces heat. It's all waste. 100% of what's going on produces heat waste. And we've got companies saying, oh, that heat waste, we're gonna put that into the city. So like, we're gonna put that into Dundee, where I'm originally from, because it's cold a lot of the year, and so now you've got free heating. Maybe that's okay in some circumstances, unless you're now using more energy to pump that heat to the city than you're saving by just getting rid of the heat. So we're doing these things, and I think they're well intentioned, but on a spreadsheet, which is where most decisions should start, it's no good. So like, move away from that, and like, let's not greenwash anymore, and then the public won't be so mad when we aren't able to follow through on those things, because essentially they're not efficient.
Okay, perfect. So in terms of optimization, I was doing more research about your company, Subsea Cloud, and I was like, how are all things done? And it's less expensive for operating cost, right? And I'll let you pitch it. Right? Please share a little bit more about exactly like the benefits of your company.
Yeah, so essentially we are a modular data center company, and we put data centers subsea for the free cooling. And so now, to put that into perspective, a normal data center, you take in 100% of the power that you need to run the servers, and then 40%, sort of more than we do, because now you need to cool them, and it's usually about 40% of a data center's total intake that goes towards cooling. So we don't have that 40%, just 100% comes in, it does the work the servers need to do, or it helps the servers do the work they need to do. And as we've discussed, when a server is working, it produces heat. It's 100% in, it's heat waste. 100% of what goes in comes out as heat waste. And so the water then cools that off, but the water itself doesn't heat up because water has a very high specific heat. And essentially what that means is water can hold more energy before it raises its own temperature, and essentially that's to do with the molecules getting excited. And so the example that I like to give is I'm in Mexico right now, and there's a beach, and I could sit on that beach and want to go into the ocean. There is an external component with seawater taking on heat through the walls of the unit, right? To backtrack a little bit here. So servers produce heat. We have a fluid inside, so they're immersion cooled. We have a fluid inside. As the servers produce heat, that excites the molecules of that internal fluid, and they create, instead of a laminar flow, they create this turbulent flow. And what that does is there's different densities in the fluid now, because some molecules are excited and others aren't because they're being cooled. So you get this turbulent flow inside, and the seawater, by hitting the very thin walls of the container, dissipates that heat essentially. And so, but it's actually really good for the environment because water warms up more slowly than air. I think I've said it can hold more heat because of the specific heat. And then what we've measured in our testing is that the water heats up by less than 1,000th of a degree at a distance of about 0.5 meter, which is just statistically insignificant. Like, you'll warm the oceans more by being on land, using more energy we're essentially by cooling the indoors of data centers, we're heating the outdoors. But when you put them into water, that kind of it's not the same physics anymore, because water has a high specific heat. And then, like, the other thing that I like to say, because it puts it in perspective for those who are maybe technical or even just intuitive, like, another way to describe that is to just say that the sun strikes the earth continuously with its like 173,000 terawatts of solar energy, and that doesn't warm the ocean in an unsustainable way. So you can put a few megawatts into water before you're going to warm the ocean. And then we are just very good economically in that it's about 80% on average less expensive to build. Just our bill of materials is low. Our labor costs they're not lower. We pay people, as they should be paid, but it's just we can do things more quickly because there's more. Like, you trawl a cable off the back of a ship. That's different than having 40 men go through a city. So we're less expensive to build. Like, capex is less expensive, and then in terms of opex, we're at least 40% less expensive because there's no power for cooling. And so those were sort of our main plays. And honestly, I think I mentioned him earlier, Dave Binswanger. He recently sent me something, and it was like, if you're gonna eat shit, like, don't nibble. And I laughed and I crumbled when I read that, because like, totally, like, I'm like, ugh, saying it and thinking it, but it's so true. And that's kind of like starting a company. So I tried to get clients, and I was so happy as an entrepreneur. Like, I've solved these problems. here's how we're superior, here's how we're good for the environment. And we were just met with like, and I was like, but this is everything you're saying you want, hyperscalers. Like, this is exactly everything you're saying behind your messaging. We're providing for you. And then they were like, and there's a few reasons for that. One, it's The Innovator's Dilemma, which is another really good book that you should definitely read if you're starting a business. It's really Christian Clayton? What is his name? Let's see. The Innovator's Dilemma. Christian. I'm getting everything in Spanish, and that's really helpful. English, please. Christian Clay. Okay, so back. We'll edit that out. So essentially, there's a book that everyone should read if they're starting a business, which is, what's his name? Clayton Christian. Yeah. Clayton Christensen. Thank you. The Innovator's Dilemma, and basically I found that to be true. The large companies, regulations like are good for the incumbents. It helps them keep their place, and they don't like disruption. And often when they've noticed the disruption, it's a little bit too late for them. And if I could just go on like a different tangent, assuming you do have a lot of founders that listen to this podcast, I don't love Lena Khan and the antitrust, I'm going to call it a movement, and that's generous, and what's been happening in the States. But actually she's been really good for startups because we're getting to create value, whereas before we would have been bought before we could really make our companies worth what they could be worth. So people like large companies who are innovation poor but cash rich, typically, there's two of you. Typically, they will like buy innovation, and there's less of that going on because Lena Khan and antitrust. So not as many startups are getting bought, but that's really good for us in the long term because now we get to create value in our own companies before we sell. So you don't sell the farm too early. And you can like, my ability to free associate is like unmatched. So I don't know if you can tie those two things together, but they are like, they intersect someplace. So I would, say about startups, read that book. It's just very interesting, and that's kind of what we were met with when we tried to come to market.
Exactly, and that's where our company, Top Cleared Recruiting, comes in. Finding the right cybersecurity talent with the necessary clearances can be a major hurdle. Did you know that it could take 8 to 15 months on average to hire somebody with a TS SCI plus full polyscope? At Top Cleared Recruiting, we have a network of 1.3 million cleared professionals, ranging from C&O developers, reverse engineers, and data scientists. Whether you're working on offensive operations or data analysis, we connect you with the elite talent you need fast. Visit topclearedrecruiting.com and let us help you to find the perfect candidate, already cleared and ready to go. Do you know any other types of companies that are like going through the similar type of things, or any types of strategies that, you know, might be able to help you guys right now? Or what kind of things are you looking at doing now in what's happening?
I'm going to answer this, and I don't think it's the way the question was intended, but how I'm sort of, the way my mind works is really the only way I can answer. But what matters in starting a company is some of the things we've already talked about. Hey, you might fail and you're going to have to do it anyway. And what I have around me is everybody that works with me at Subsea Cloud is much smarter, like by a country mile. And so I'm forced to listen to them, and I'm forced to synthesize, which is my like great skill. I can take a lot of information, synthesize, and try to come to what I think is the right decision. And hey, if it's the wrong one, doesn't matter, because I've made it with all the information that I was able to get. And so that's kind of my strategy. And then back to what Dave, has said, which is over time, determination looks like talent. And like, you just have to be determined. So risk of failure, determination, and for me, synthesizing information to try and make some of the quote unquote right decisions. And there's a lot of unintended consequences every time you make a decision. And that's just it's kind of the way it goes. And in my industry, it's both good and bad, right? We have old white men only, and their whole outlook is, well, it's always been done this way, so we'll continue to do it this way. And we're really the decision makers. And so I don't have a big voice at the table. That's okay for me. I just find a way to go around them. Like, it goes back to someone someone we talked about earlier, which is sometimes it's a bug and sometimes it's a feature of my personality that as soon as I've been told no, well, fuck you, like, I'll do it anyway. And that's kind of really having to dig into that to make this company successful.
Excellent. So how many clients do you guys have right now, and how have you guys acquired those clients? Did you guys do like cold outreach, or did you know somebody well? Is it your strong, massive network?
We do a lot. No. We do a lot of trials with some of the larger companies, and we try and get them.
Do you guys eat that cost, or do you say like, let's try this out?
Depends.
Okay.
If we don't have to, like we're like, do you want to pay for it? And then like, and we're coming up to that again because we've got absolutely no GPUs in the water at all. We've never put a GPU in the water. That wasn't, how things started. It was just CPUs. And so now we are just pushing on different, we've all heard of those companies, I won't name them. We're pushing on them to like trial with us for GPUs, and it's almost been back to square one because now we're going through the same rigmarole. Everything you touch comes from the subsea environment, don't be scared of it. Here's how it's beneficial, so on and so forth. And so we hope to have a GPU trial in the water sort of February, but it's looking a little bit more like March now. We think that will probably be in Denmark by the looks of things, but we're starting to warm up on our pre-engineering on a UK trial with the Scottish government involved and a couple other companies. So we've created like a little trial ecosystem that can scale, and that's kind of the strategy just now.
Okay, got it. Do you guys also look at other types of like crypto mining markets since they have GPUs and like there's a different level of funding, or do you guys like just stay away from the crypto investments?
No. I mean, like, I'm neutral to positive on crypto, just generally. And we looked at doing it in Iceland, but actually Iceland can do it more cheaply than we can just in a warehouse. And so we've found that there's like not a huge appetite. That might change in America when Trump comes in, if he is going to be this like, pro-crypto president. We shall see. Because of course it is very cheap for us to do, just not relative to Iceland. So yeah, we do look at that. We do.
Okay. Oh, how is Iceland doing it cheaper?
Cost of cooler low, and their bill of materials is also low because they're just like kind of like warehouses, in Iceland, and I think probably the I'm not entirely sure. This is conjecture on my part, but I think probably the cost of power is low.
All right. And what kind of companies do you guys go after? Are you talking like small businesses, medium-sized ones? Or are you talking big boy, Amazon, Google?
Big boy is like been our focus to date, and we definitely go after them. And the like SME market has been invisible to me. I don't know the players there, and we're starting to like look there a little bit. And now our strategy also, we were like re-strategizing a little bit internally and moving away from trying to get 1 or 2 or 3 companies to come with us. And we're just on 100% of our portfolio would have just been company, cloud provider come into us and then service their clients. Now, some percentage of our portfolio will also be direct to market. So we'll just rent GPU and probably CPU capacity directly out to the market at, $4 an hour per GPU. and it's very lucrative, but it's our capex costs go up by a lot because it costs us about $60 million to fill every unit with GP.
And renting them out, is that what you're saying?
And renting them out just directly to the market, yeah. So I think we're probably going to start that next year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Looking for funding, that's right. So share what you guys are looking for. Who's your ideal investor if they just were listening to this podcast and gave you a call afterwards? Who's that person?
I mean,
On
the funding partner, we've got natural partners in like oil and gas. They understand the subsea environment and they have funds. And then we have like good sovereign wealth funds, like Norway and things like that. So we do have some financial partners, but who we are looking for are like the people who are okay. Basically my mindset, like, you're okay to fail because it is a possibility, and I know people, like my team hates when I say that because the messaging should be very positive. Yeah, whatever, failure is a potential outcome. So someone who's like okay with that but will mitigate against it, which is kind of like how I try to operate. And so probably like a family office, maybe wealthy individual, probably doesn't matter to me. We'll see. We just somebody, yeah.
You guys are looking for about 65 million, I think you said, with 60 being
Well,
the cost for operations.
60 is probably what it'll cost for the hardware to go inside.
Hardware,
just
okay.
for like servers, and we don't, we get probably 80% of that funded through some of our existing financial partners. So we're just looking for about 20% of that amount, and we'll see. We just started. We'll see how it goes. I'll let you know if it goes well.
Yeah, let us know. What kind of numbers are you guys looking for then? If that wasn't accurate, what I said.
We're looking for on average like about $12 million. So, we'll see.
Okay, perfect. And then let's see. We're talking about crypto markets. We talked about other GPUs, like first being and then actually selling directly to them, to the audience. That would be, from my understanding, that would be a pretty big business shift over, right, in terms of operation, because now you're having to work with like a subscription model of users that are going to be utilizing your stuff and then have different types of like legal ramifications for the things that they're doing on the servers. Does that sound accurate or not accurate?
Kind of. I think what we'll do is we might go through sort of a core weave where we might just be the space and we might not have to buy the servers, or even if we are, we might still partner with that type of company and basically hands off a little bit. So all we are responsible for is the maintenance, and then there are third parties that look after like the actual traffic and everything else that's happening there, the cybersecurity. We don't have an in-house NOC or even really SOC. So we'll probably leverage third parties for those type of things.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much information about your guys' company, what you guys are doing. Is there anything else that I might have missed that you want to share in terms of what you guys are doing now in the future?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it, and it's sort of interesting. Most of it's sort of, there's this asymmetry of information when you're sat as the founder and CEO of a company, and any company. And I think that sometimes because you're in your own little echo chamber, a lot of the time you're just processing, synthesizing information, and so it's quite handy sometimes to hear yourself say things, and then they'll live forever digitally, and I'm sure I'll fucking eat shit on this at some point in my life to be like, remember when you said. But like, one of the things we were talking about, like, if you're not good at sales but you are good enough at like peopling, I think there's like a really important concept, and I can't remember where I learned it. I'm sure it was a book, of 6 degrees of separation. Have you heard of that concept? Which is this idea that all people are 6 or fewer like social connections away from one another. So like, I can plot my way to, like, Trump. I can see my few degrees of separation from him, and like that's a really interesting network effect to see how far away, like, yeah, the social connections to, like, the most important person on the planet, whether you like him or not, just now. So it's really interesting that way, and networks really matter. Not to get to the president, and I couldn't, but like, my point remains that networking is like very important, and to keep your network alive and to reach out.
So let's talk about networking just for a few moments,
Yeah.
if that's okay. You still have some time.
Yeah.
I don't want to rob you of
Yeah.
Mexico time
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the beach and everything.
But the water will be cooler. Okay, continue.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. God, I hate the Pacific Ocean. That's a whole other tangent. Everyone's like, California weather. It's like, oh, it's nice. But I hate the Pacific.
Not when
It's
you're in the
freezing.
water. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Well, and the Great Whites. Whew. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
Books, networking. So yeah, networking. Okay, so let's say you have, and you know that you're 3 from Trump or whatever the case is. Like, how do you connect with those types of individuals and have a conversation to be able to increase your depth in specific?
Yeah. So again, it sort of goes back to, I'm always ready to meet someone where they are. So podcasts are a different thing. It's about you, and it's about your personal brand, so to speak. So you talk a little bit more, you talk about yourself, and you, I'm sure, come over fairly narcissistic in those conversations. Like, I'm very aware of that as I'm talking, but what other choice do I have? Like, I'm not going to interview you. That's very
Feel
different.
free.
Yeah, you know what? Let's redo this again
Yeah,
in like
sure.
a couple of weeks. I'll interview you. Yeah,
I'm
that'd be
interested.
great.
Yeah,
Well,
that'd be great.
absolutely no one should watch that. But yeah, so I think that when I go out, I'm just very interested in you. I want to know about you, and that's kind of what people are looking for. Like, that's how you get the connection. And once you've done that with people, and you start to learn them, and you start to remember information about them, it makes them feel important. And like, that's what you should do. And if people aren't doing that for you, like, I'm okay with that. I don't really need that. But there are people who do that for me, and I'm like grateful. Then it makes me feel comfortable with them, and then they learn more about me, and at the same time I'm learning more about them. But it can be very one-sided. It can be very one-directional, and where you're learning this other person, and you're like honestly and authentically interested in them. And I think that's the right starting point for a network. And it can be one-dimensional in that you can only be interested about their work, but you're not really interested about their home life. You might have to touch on it sometimes, but like, you're just really interested in their jobs. And so like, it's okay to have that focus and then catch up with them. So like, that's what I mean by the networking. And then by catching up with them, because you already started from this honest place of like, I am interested in you as a person. Like, a tangential, like a little cul-de-sac here. I'm interested in my Uber driver. I want to know, like, why are you driving Uber? Why not cab? Why are you in New York City or wherever it is at the time? And everybody like has an interesting story, and it's sort of how I view information. Everything is interesting if you go into it deeply enough. So I was listening to a podcast about sand a few years ago, and I still remember it. It was before I cared about silicon and chips. And I was like, how, sand end up as glass. And you're like, really, that's what you were listening to? It's interesting. And most people have some interesting story. You just have to like pull it out of them. And so I think doing that is very helpful. And I find that is a differentiator for me when I go out into the market here, and I, go to conferences, and I'm trying to connect with people. Like, when I take an interest in them, and actually it's usually away from their work, their family, their interests, why they're here, how they got into it maybe, but not specifically their role at work. They open up and like, they're comfortable and they bloom, and I get a dopamine hit from that. Now I'm understanding like, oh, you're enjoying this, good, now I'm enjoying it too. And so I think that's really the only way I know how to do it, and it's also why I'm not good at sales. Conversely, I can't sit there and like sell my product very well, and I also don't think you want to hear that from me. So now I've got in my head that you don't want to hear what I'm saying, and I'm acting like that and so I'll never be able to sell you a thing. So I kind of have to go the other way.
Got it. So you say you approach it more on a personal level and just try to get to understand the individual to then start shifting over towards a business type of relationship if it naturally perspires.
Well, if it naturally occurs, because they know what I do. They'll ask me, we'll talk about it, and then we'll move away from that. And if it's of interest to them, they come back to me. And if it's not, then they don't. And that's okay. Listen, it's not the right. That's like every salesperson on earth is like hoping for me to be shot into the middle of the sun, I'm sure, right now. But like, that's how I have to do it. It's not the right way to do sales. I think there's a far more efficient and effective way. It's just how I do sales.
That's interesting. Have you also experienced other authors and stuff like that from books that you've read that speak about networking in this way?
No, I think this is comes from my eclectic sort of style brain. I think it's just very core to who I am, and I don't expect a lot of people to agree with it or adopt this as their process. So no, I've not heard very many people talk about it this way. Okay,
well, it was very interesting. I always, when I'm speaking to other people and stuff like this, I think I do something similar where I want to know more about them. But I've also, apparently it's American to ask, what do you do for work? Have you seen this? I thought that was just networking, but people are like, why do Americans talk so much about what they do for work? And it's like, well, we love it.
What else would you,
what else is there?
Yeah, I know. So I've been Americanized that way, in that I ask that now, but when I came here, I was like, you'd be sitting on a plane next to somebody and they'd be like, what do you do? Before your name sometimes, and you're like, well, I work offshore. Like, why? Am I going to get kidnapped? Like, do you want my liver? So like but now I'm very used to that, and I'm it's a really interesting experiment. Next time you're, on vacation or however you meet strangers, you're on the bus, to not ask them what they do. Like, I
didn't even know what you do. We're just talking bullshit, like, oh, you have cats? Great. I'm never going to remember you. Like, everyone has cats. Sorry.
That's so true. I think like there are other, like, one of the things that I like to do with people is a little bit of guesswork. So I like to, if someone's holding a book and I've read that book, I'll immediately, they could be mid-sentence and I'm like, oh, I've read that book. And they're like, I'm still reading it, like, fuck off. But like, so, but there are other things that like I like
start
to
up. Hey, that book
people.
sucks. You just gotta let
sucks.
it
Yeah, like, don't get to the end of that book. Shit.
That was the worst ending.
Or if I've not, I'm like, is that book good? And they're like, I'm still reading it. So yeah, like, but there's an interesting way I find that I like to like try to read to people. So if I'm standing, I do it when there's no chance I'll ever have any discussion with them. I'll do it like if I'm standing the line for the bank and there's someone next to me, I'm like, are his clothes ironed? Is his hair neat? Is his beard trimmed? What about his fingernails? Like, and like, do I like his cologne, or can I smell it, or like whatever it is. Like, I'm like trying to take in information about you, and I will also do that when I'm sat next to somebody on an airplane, and now I'm trying to work out little things about you, and that can keep you away from the work question if it's important to you to stay away from that question, and just like work out, like, are they wearing a wedding ring? Is there a tan line around the wedding? Was their wedding ring off for a while? Those sorts of things. And so where you just, and then you can like find ways in the conversation to like find out if what you're thinking is true. And like, I enjoy that game. I really enjoy that game. It's not for everyone. It's a little bit of a weird.
What are okay? So those are, you mentioned a few of them. So like the wedding ring band thing. Like if it's like if they're recently divorced or not divorced. What are some other ones that you look for?
Yeah, so like the wedding band thing for sure. I'm a hands person. If you've got ugly hands,
the fuck?
I'm not gonna be able to like. It's a weird thing. I'm not.
The hands are fine. What is the hands telling you?
They don't tell you much, but like, are your fingernails long as a man? Are
just
your
the
fingernails
pinky.
like or like then I'm like or are your fingernails like chewed as a woman or man? Like, what does that tell me? Do you have like sleep under your eyes? Like those sorts of things. So I'm looking just for like little signs of your day. And when I'm,
See,
so
you look tired as fuck. You just look at that.
Yeah, like you look like shit. You had a hard time. And I noticed this like tan line where your wedding ring used to be. Are you? Is it her? No. So yeah, there are certain things like that I look for.
You just start smiling. Recently divorced, huh? Congratulations.
Yeah, you're like, it's a good time, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been through it a couple of times. It's sort of interesting to take those things about people, and as a social engineer and red teamer, you are taking that information in. You can't always act on it, but like there are some things you can tell about a person. And I like one of the things that are your clothes ironed? That was and this is like really sexist. Are they ironed? Was that your wife?
No one loves me. Like, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No one loves me either. My clothes are crinkled. They come out with the dryer, they go on the floor. So yeah,
they sit on the bed for a
little
week.
Things like that. And then in Los Angeles is a really interesting place, and I know like we're probably at time, but Los Angeles is interesting because the optics are different. You can present a narrative that is absolutely not true. So the amount of people I know in Los Angeles,
that's all that is there.
Yeah, they have like a Lamborghini, but I know where they live. I know they live in a bedsit or a studio in Burbank, and so I'm like, yeah, if we're out, and the girl sees you pull up in your Lamborghini, and we get out with it, and we've squashed 4 people in there, and we get out, then I know what she thinks about you, right? Like she's like, oh, you've got like a sports car in Los Angeles. And I'm looking at her thinking, don't fall for it. Like, do not fall for that. And we used that when we were on engagements as social engineers and as red teamers, where we were like, okay, we hired a car, I think it was like a big like Escalade. And I was sat in the back, and my other teammate let me out the door at the back. And it's good optics because now I look, quote unquote, important. And I had my little briefcase, and teetering in there like I was very important. And like, it's the start of the game.
They got to make it loud, and like announcing.
Yeah.
Maxie
Reynolds. Woo! Yeah, it's like a W. Yeah, what's it? WNE?
I have a question. So, who would you take on like red teaming engagements?
Oh God. Yeah, like I actually wasn't prepared for it. Who would I take?
And his name is John C.
Okay, I'd take Grifter because he's really good on the tools, and he looks really innocent, and I don't think that he is. I would take Snow because Snow is also very unassuming, and I know she's a deviant in the best way. I'd take Kat Murdoch because she is like, I think Kat's probably one of the smartest people that I know. She's just very switched on. She could run circles around me on my best day. And I would probably take Marcus, who you've had on, just because Marcus is like this very calming presence. The shit we talk to one another, like, I know it's America and the C word is like not loved here. It's, marriage proposal in my country. Like, I got him a mug that is like, has that word on it. We constantly just like,
what we're
terrible to one another. Yeah, like I texted him not that long ago, and I was like, "Are you miserable? Because I need a little pick me up." And he's like, "I am now that I've heard from you." So we've got this like banter, but outside of that, you don't see that on him. Like he's a very calming presence, and that's very helpful on red team engagements. And then I'd obviously take the whole red team alliance guys, and then I'm sure there are other people who are going to be like, "I can't believe you didn't see me," but I can't think of everybody just now. But that's probably my like dream team. Yeah, I like those ones.
Nice. Have you been on engagements with any of them previously? Some of them?
I've not. So I'm sure they'd screw me over, but no, I'm not. No.
Okay, well, wishing to.
Yeah, we need a little test. If there's a company out there who wants to hire my, fantasy.
It's a big team though as well. Like you guys rolling deep in like 2 different like blacked out SUVs. Like
Yeah. I think yeah. We well, so for most red team engagements that I've been on, you go once during the day and that's more of a social engineering exercise. You're like trying to get past the people, and then again at night time to like try and get past some of the security and so on and so forth. So we could split the team, I think, fairly well.
So I have a question. Have you read any other types of books pertaining to like identifying specific individuals and stuff like that? So like one book that I've mentioned in passings was like I read the Artist Direction by Robert Greene. So I'll like subconsciously like I'd be drunk at a bar or whatever, and I just hear someone hitting on a girl, and I'm like, oh, that's not gonna work, bro, in my head, and I'm just like playing it out. I'm like, oh, it's not gonna work for like these 10 reasons, and it's like I have all this advice, but I don't want to be that a guy to be like, hey man, you ain't doing this right. Like,
yeah, here's how you do it.
This is
like,
how you do
really?
it, but I can't do it either. So I'll just whisper in your ear what you should maybe be doing.
Yeah, I don't know of this book, but now I'm gonna read it.
Artist Seduction's great. Robert Greene is a terrific author. He's done 48 Laws of Power. Artist, you know him?
Okay, I don't.
48 Laws of Power, Artist Seduction. The most recent one was like Human Nature. I didn't, that one was kind of funky to me. I don't know if I like that one as much, but Artist Seduction was really interesting. I read a lot of psychology books as well.
I don't.
In general.
Really? I try to stay away from them.
You wrote one, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I tried to stay away from psychology books in case they fall into the self-help category, which I've got no time for. But if it's a full-on, like, just actual, like, scientific research book, then I'll read it.
Well, what's the difference between, like, self-help versus, like, you're learning, I don't know, networking skills or something like this as a book?
What's the difference? They're not soft and they're actionable, I think. And that's all
actionable.
I care about. Very outcome-driven as a person.
Well, okay, here's one. Like, Atomic Habits. Have you read Atomic Habits by James Clear?
No. I'm not.
Okay. That's the actionable one. It's okay. Good. Yeah, I think it's good because it breaks down like what a habit is and then divides up like, okay, now the good ones, you want to keep them, right? Here are some ways to do that. And here are the bad ones. How do you get rid of them and make things more difficult to like keep doing those things? And it kind of gives like an easier like not step by step, well, but like kind of telling you like these are the 3 things that maybe you should look out for if you want to do whatever to the habit, so you can like build upon those types of things. It could be like a quick YouTube video as well, like 10-minute one if you just wanted to crush it.
Sorry, let me answer your question. So yes, I have not read those. Similar to that book maybe is I think it's called the Power of Habit or something like that.
The Power of Habit.
Yeah, I read that probably 15 years ago.
Oh, fuck. I hated that book. Did you like that book?
I loved that book.
Oh, it was so good. Yeah, let's talk about it.
I loved that book. It was, I still, it stayed with me. I read it once and it stayed with me, which I think is the sign of a good book. But no, so I read books where the messaging is clear. What the author's trying to get over is what he talks about, or she talks about the length of the book, and it doesn't wander. And I don't think, fuck, this should have been an article. And I've read a few of those books.
Right?
God,
yeah.
This should have been shorter.
Mm-hmm. A lot of books like are like that in psychology or stuff. Yeah. It's like you'll read. It's like this is the concept, and chapter 1's like, so let me tell you a story about how part of this concept works. And it's like I don't need to know this.
You don't need the root cause. Just like. In every case, but I think the best books I've read, and they've been helpful for me, just across life, not always in business, are How the World Really Works by Vaclav Smil. I love that book. Really, I think it should be mandatory for people. Outlaw Ocean, very interesting book. It doesn't pertain to what I do, but it's industry, like adjacent, I guess. Like it's about the ocean, and also, like, that is just a very, very interesting book. I can't remember the author anymore. Outlaw Ocean is by...
Outlaw Ocean?
Outlaw Ocean.
It's by, I'm still in Italian. Ian Urbina.
Ian Urbana. Yeah, I think it's Ian Urbana, Outlaw Ocean, brilliant book, quite sad for the most part. Like, most trafficked are men on shipping boats, and this like indenture culture is not the right word, trap that they're put in.
Trafficked?
Trafficked. Men are like trafficked for fishing. It's wild. And it's
For fishing? What would you...
For fishing, like illegal fishing boats, use men. So what, they'll go into like little villages, or not even little villages, just people where people are sort of poor, and they'll say like, you know, come and work for us on our fleet, and they'll take them out to sea and they won't pay them, and you can't get off, and they'll say like, well, you're actually due us money for the flights and for whatever else it is, and they like train men up. There's literally men offshore who have been trained up for months. So like, it's a really hard book. Like, I wouldn't say I enjoyed every page, but it's one of those things. We can't have this culture of safetyism where you don't learn that there are hard things going on in the world because it makes you uncomfortable, even though you didn't go through them. So I think that's a really important book. Also, the first chapter was amazing. It was about Sea Shepherd, which is, I'm sure it's the guy that like started Greenpeace. Yeah. And then Greenpeace, and then he started whatever company it is, and then he's got Sea Shepherd, and they, you know, they are like the law of the ocean sort of thing. They try and help. So that's a really good book. I think Prisoners of Geography, which is Tim Marshall's book. I don't know if it's his first, but very important book. Talks about how geography impacts not only globalization, but just how countries interact. And it was written, I think, nearly 20 years ago, 20 years ago, and it's extremely relevant to today. It shows you exactly why we're in the position we are with Russia and Ukraine. And it also just talks about, yes, it's geopolitical through the lens of geography, and it's infinitely interesting, really easy read. I loved Freakonomics. I just enjoyed like the data that I got from that book and the way they presented it, which made it really easy to like hold that information. Like, drug dealers are some of the poorest paid people in the world, but here's why they do it. And I was like, that's very interesting. Or call girls don't actually want anything to be legalized. Well, maybe not all of them, but generalizing, call girls don't want things to be legalized because then they'd have to pay tax. And I was like, yeah, I never thought of that. But do you want workers' rights? No, we don't. We're fine. And then Shoe Dog was really good. Christian Clayton's, I'm never going to get his name. Innovator's Dilemma, really important book.
Have you heard New Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
I loved that book. That was a really good book. I learned a lot from that book. It's almost hard to believe, and yet believable. The other book that I really just loved was Stuff Matters.
Stuff Matters.
Also cannot remember the author, but basically it introduces you to like the basic properties of many of our like most important materials that we use in our day-to-day life, and it's just really engaging and fun and interesting. I like got this like childlike curiosity back as I read it. You know, some books I read and I'm just like pounding the pages sort of thing, like I just want the information. This book was like almost reading a novel. It was just like, I felt like warm after reading it. It was just really good.
Do you read novels as well, or do you stick to mostly nonfiction?
I think, no, I read novels, not as much as I guess used to or would like, but I think novels are very important because essentially problem solving is imagination based. Like, you need data, you need information, you need to know the parameters, you need first principles, but ultimately to solve a problem it's you need some imagination, and I think fiction's really good for just keeping that, your imagination sort of almost well oiled.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. All right, great. Well, we've shared so much.
We've spoken for a long time, yeah.
It's probably time to wrap some stuff up. But it's been very great speaking to you. I hope that we touched on all the points that you wanted to discuss about your company and then what you guys are looking for and how things are going in the future. We spoke on books. We talked about your different careers and things that you've done. I'm excited to see what you're going to do next. And as things are going to continue down the path, whatever they may be, whether you succeed or fail, it's going to be another story that you'll be able to write. And speaking about writing and your own stories for your own life, you've written 2 books already. Do you think you'll write another one that just 3? Excuse me. There's a third one on Amazon.
Please. Yeah. Do I think I'll write more? Yes, I do.
You said it was 8 weeks. They're like, you got to write this book in 8 weeks, and you're like, oh fuck, and then
I had a stroke. Yeah.
How did you do that and accomplish it so quickly?
I was absent from my life and my partner and social circles, and I got to be. And it was made easy for me that way, and I had some structure to it. Here's when I write, here's when I think about what I'm gonna write, here's when I re-edit that and carve it out. And that took just a lot of self-discipline and a lot of missing out on, it was over the Christmas period, just a lot of missing out on
wow. Okay.
the fun that I otherwise would have been having, but I get to live for another probably 60 years, and so I'm okay to miss one.
Okay, excellent. Well, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for your time today, Maxie. Really appreciate you sharing all the insights that you've been doing. We look to follow you and see great things that come from you and your company.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to just scream at you for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's great. Feel free to we can touch back next time, and if you want to interview me and just start having me scream at you, and you can see what it's like to be a host. Hey, you can try.
Some
it's
equity.
So hard.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, enjoy your time in Mexico, and thank you so much for making time for us and for this.
Thanks a lot.
Enjoy the beach.
Bye. Bye.